Hospitals are supposed to be places of healing, but for me, it became the scene of my final breaking point. The sterile scent of antiseptic still clung to my skin, mingling with the faint hum of medical machines. I was still in scrubs, my side stitched up, the pain from the impact of the car crash still sharp in my ribs. I hadn't even had a chance to fully process what had happened. I was lost in the haze of morphine when the door to my hospital room swung open with a loud creak. There, in the doorway, stood my father. "Pay rent, or get out." His voice hit me like a slap in the face, even before the physical one came. I blinked, stunned, my mind racing to keep up. "What?" I whispered, barely able to comprehend the words coming from his mouth. Before I could even finish the word, his hand was already coming down. The slap was so forceful, it sent me crashing sideways off the bed, my body hitting the floor with a sickening thud. Pain shot through my ribs as blood filled my mouth. I couldn't stop the cough that followed, the taste of metal filling my senses. "You think you're too good for this family?" he sneered. His face hovered over me, a look of superiority in his eyes, as though I were beneath him. "This is what you deserve." Lying there, my body aching, I felt the familiar sting of rejection. I had always been his disappointment, his burden. But this time, something inside me shifted. I wasn't the scared little girl who had been taught to accept abuse. No, this time, I was done. It all started 3 months ago when I had moved back in with him. It wasn't a choice, not really. The clinic had cut my hours, the landlord had raised the rent again, and with Dan's 6-year-old daughter needing a roof over her head more than I needed my pride, I didn't have a choice. Dad said it would be temporary. But I knew better. Nothing with him ever came without a cost. At first, it was small things, groceries, gas, fixing the Wi-Fi. I didn't mind, not at first. But then, as the days turned into weeks, the demands grew. "You're using the most heat, so you'll need to pay more," he'd say, casually sipping his coffee as if it were normal to charge your own daughter for the space she was living in. Eric, my younger brother, still lived at home. The golden child, always the one who got a pass for everything. I came home after back-to-back shifts to find him sprawled on the couch, his gaming headset over his ears while Dad told me, "He's going through a rough patch. He can't work right now." Rough patch? The only patch he was going through was one of laziness. Yet, he still ordered Uber Eats every day on my card without asking, and I paid it without question. Because that's what family does, right? That's what Dad would always tell me, his voice that heavy, oppressive tone that used to freeze me as a child. "Family helps family," he'd say. But it was clear, family only helped when they were getting something in return. Dani noticed the tension. She stopped humming when we came home, started clutching her bunny tighter. One night, as we brushed her teeth together, she asked me, "Mommy, is Grandpa mad at me too?" The question broke me. How could I explain to her that the man who should have protected us, who should have loved us unconditionally, was the one making us feel like we were a burden? But it wasn't until that week, when Eric ran up another credit card bill and Dad demanded I pay it, that I realized just how far they'd gone. "Don't act like you can't afford it," Dad growled, his eyes narrowing as he leaned over me, waiting for my answer. "I'm saving for Dani's inhaler," I said quietly, trying to remain calm. His jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with anger. "What's more important?" he snapped. "Her lungs or your brother's future?" That was the moment. The moment I knew I had to do something. I couldn't live like this anymore. But I didn't know how to break free. Not yet. Then, the accident happened. I was driving home from a brutal overnight shift, the rain slicking the roads. My eyes were heavy, my mind foggy, when I blinked too long at a red light. The truck coming across my lane was all I saw before it was too late. The impact sent my car spinning. I woke up on a stretcher, Dan's name on my lips. The doctor told me I was lucky. 6 stitches along my ribs, a sprain in my left wrist, and a bad bruise across my hip. They kept me overnight for observation. But the real shock came the next morning. Dad walked into my room, no flowers, no concern for my well-being, just that same voice, filled with entitlement. "Pay rent or get out." And that slap. The bruise on my ribs pulsed every time I breathed. They discharged me with gauze, painkillers, and a warning to rest. But how do you rest in a house that doesn't feel safe? When I got home, Dad was in the kitchen like nothing had happened. He didn't acknowledge the bandage under my shirt or the slap that still burned on my cheek. He didn't care that I had just been through a traumatic experience. His eyes, cold and indifferent, barely looked up from the morning paper as he sipped his coffee. "You remember to pay the utilities?" he asked casually, as if we were just two roommates sharing a house, not a father and daughter stuck in an unhealthy cycle. I swallowed the lump in my throat, fighting the urge to lash out. "Yeah, I'll take care of it," I muttered, keeping my eyes down, my hands trembling slightly. I was losing myself again, retreating into the role I had played so many times before. The dutiful daughter who did everything to keep the peace, no matter the cost. But something inside me was shifting, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. That night, after Dani fell asleep, I sat on the edge of her bed, tracing the scar on her cheek from a fall she had taken a few weeks ago. The scar had healed, but the memory of her panic when she'd hurt herself still lingered in my mind. I had been terrified then. Now, my own pain seemed insignificant. It didn't matter to Dad. It didn't matter to Eric. I wasn't part of their world anymore. I was just a provider, a source of income to keep the house running. That was all. The next morning, the weight of it all became unbearable. A letter was slid under my door. I recognized the typeface immediately, official, cold, and to the point. I opened it slowly, my heart pounding. Effective immediately, rent will increase by $200 a month due to additional strain on household income. Payment expected by Friday. Signed, House Management G. Monroe. I laughed, but it wasn't out of amusement. It was the kind of laugh you make when you're about to lose control. If I didn't laugh, I might scream. I texted Dad, asking if this was some kind of joke. His response came instantly. "You live under my roof. You pay what I say." That's how adulthood works. I didn't know what hurt more, the words or the reminder that this was my reality. That I had allowed it to go on for so long. 2 days later, Eric knocked on my door, his eyes downcast, avoiding my gaze. "Hey, Dad said you'd help cover my car insurance this month," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I blinked, trying to process the request. "Your car hasn't moved in weeks. Why do you need insurance?" He shrugged, unfazed. "Still gotta keep it running." I stood there, silent, feeling the anger build in my chest. It was like I was an ATM, no PIN required. Even Dani noticed the change. One night, as we brushed her teeth together, she whispered, "Mommy, why does Grandpa only talk nice when you give him money?" The question struck me like a dagger. How could I explain to her that the man she loved was the one who had turned our lives into a prison? How could I make her understand that she didn't deserve to be treated this way? I didn't have an answer. But something inside me shifted the next day. Megan, my best friend from nursing school, came by with groceries and a soft blanket, her eyes full of concern. She had been trying to reach me for days, and when I finally picked up the phone, I couldn't hold back the tears. "I'm sorry, I've been so out of it," I whispered through the sobs. She listened quietly, then said, "Jessa, you know your mom left you something, right?" I froze, the words catching in my throat. I had known about the things my mom had left behind, but I had never thought to go through them. Not until now. Megan reached into her purse and pulled out an old brass key. It was small, worn from years of use, but there was something comforting about it. "I've been holding on to this for you since your mom passed," she explained, her voice soft. "She wanted you to have it when things got too much." I took the key, my hands trembling. It felt heavy in my palm, and for the first time in months, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this key could unlock a way out. That night, I stared at it for hours. The tiny M engraved near the base was a reminder of the past, of my mother, and of the life I could have if I was brave enough to take it. The next morning, after dropping Dani off at school, I drove to the house. The house that used to be my mom's, the house I had been avoiding for years. It sat at the corner of Ash and Hamilton, the porch slightly tilted, the wind chimes still hanging by the door as if time had stood still. Inside, the air smelled of old books and lavender, just like I remembered. Everything was just as it had been when I was a child, quiet, peaceful, and untouched. But there, in the back of the closet, I found the filing cabinet. The one my mom had always kept locked. I slid the key into the lock, and the drawer creaked open, revealing neatly labeled folders. Property, East Oak, Bank, Trust Account, Letters to J. I pulled out the last folder. The one labeled Jessa. Inside were 3 things. A notarized letter naming me as the sole beneficiary of my grandfather's estate, a deed for the property we were living in, and a short handwritten note from my mom. It read, "If you're reading this, it means you've endured far more than I ever wanted for you. They will take until nothing is left. This house is yours now. Use it. Protect Danny. And never let guilt be the leash that binds you. Love, Mom." I sat on the floor, the papers clutched to my chest, my heart racing. The house wasn't Dad's. It was mine. And with that realization came the power to change everything. The realization hit me like a freight train. The house wasn't Dad's. It never had been. It was mine. My mom had left it to me, and now I had the legal right to take control. I didn't go home that night. I stayed at Megan's. Danny was thrilled to have a sleepover with her godmother. I, on the other hand, finally slept a full night for the first time in months, the weight of years of frustration, guilt, and fear beginning to lift off my shoulders. The next morning, the sun came through the blinds, and for the first time in ages, I woke up feeling like I could breathe. I knew what I had to do. I packed a thermos of tea, dropped Danny off at school, and drove back to the house. The house that was now mine, the house that had been taken over by my father's dominance, manipulation, and control. I parked in front, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. The place looked the same, old, familiar, but something had changed. The air felt different. The tension, the suffocating weight of the past few months was gone. It had shifted from being his house to mine, and I could feel it in my bones. When I stepped inside, I was hit with the smell of stale coffee and old memories. Dad was at the kitchen table, scribbling something on a napkin, his usual ritual. Eric was sprawled on the couch, his gaming headset still on, not a care in the world. "Where were you?" Dad muttered without looking up, his voice devoid of concern, as if nothing had happened. I took a deep breath, steadying myself before I responded. "With Danny at Megan's," I said, my voice calm, controlled. Dad scoffed, still not looking at me. "Next time, let someone know. You don't just walk out of someone else's house like that." I smiled, a cold, bitter smile that didn't reach my eyes. If only he knew. If only he understood that everything was about to change. That week, I began quietly gathering everything. Photographs of the utility bills with my name on them, bank records, rent transfers, even the Venmo receipts Eric had sent with little captions like, "Thanks, Ish." It all went into a cheap external drive, neatly labeled, documentation. Monroe House. Every night, after Danny fell asleep, I added to it. Megan helped me file a request with the county clerk's office. We confirmed what the papers had already told me. I own the deed outright. No shared title. No active mortgage. Just my name tied to a trust set up by my grandfather and sealed by my mother before she passed. The house Dad had been so proud of, the house he ruled with an iron fist, was mine. I kept my silence, but inside, I felt the stirring of something new, something fierce. Then came the night it all shifted. It was Tuesday. I had just come home from a short shift. I was sore, still healing from the crash, but I was stronger now. Danny was sitting on her bed, tracing the ears of Bunny, her stuffed toy. I could tell she was lost in thought, her eyes clouded. When she looked up and saw me, she whispered, "Grandpa said if I keep leaving the lights on, we might not have a place to stay." My heart shattered. He was threatening her now? My daughter, my baby, the one person I had vowed to protect above all else? I knelt down beside her, brushing her hair back gently. "This is our home, baby," I whispered, my voice soft but firm. "And no one can take it away from us." Danny didn't respond. She just curled tighter into herself, the sadness in her eyes breaking me. But this time, I wasn't going to let him win. That night, I made a decision. I took my phone and recorded a video. The words came easily now. I detailed everything: the slap at the hospital, the rent demands, the emotional abuse, the manipulation. I attached clips of Eric bragging about how he didn't have to pay a dime because sis covers everything. I labeled the file just in case. It was for Dani, in case something happened. In case I wasn't there to protect her. The next morning, I called the attorney who had helped with Mom's estate. I told him everything, all the details, all the pain. And without hesitation, he responded, "You have every legal right to file for eviction. And given the emotional abuse, you may also qualify for a protection order." His words were steady, calm, like this was just another routine case. But I felt the gravity of it all. The weight of my decision pressing down on me. I set the papers on the desk in front of me. My hand trembled just once before I steadied it. I looked up at him and said, "For the record, I'm not doing this out of anger." He raised an eyebrow. "Then why?" I smiled, a smile full of clarity and determination. "Because I'm done paying for silence." The days leading up to the eviction were tense, but for the first time, I felt a sense of control. The house had been my prison for so long, but now it was mine to command. And with that came the realization that I no longer had to be the person who bent to everyone's will. I woke up early on the day of the eviction, long before the sun had risen. Dani was still asleep, curled up tightly around Bunny. I kissed her forehead, her tiny hand still clutching the stuffed rabbit as the soft morning light traced the curve of her cheek. I whispered softly, "Today's the day," knowing that once everything was over, we could begin the process of healing, of finally moving on. In the kitchen, I made coffee, the rhythmic sound of the grinder soothing my nerves. The weight of what I was about to do still made my heart race, but it was different now. It wasn't fear anymore, it was clarity. The knock on the door came before I was ready. It was a small sound, almost hesitant, but it shook me to the core. I stood there for a moment, still holding the mug, gathering my strength. Then I opened the door. The county deputy stood there, professional and calm, clipboard in hand. Behind him was Leah, arms crossed, phone ready. And then I saw Val peeking through her curtains, her eyes full of judgment, the woman who had always supported Dad's side. But today, there was no sympathy in her eyes. "Ma'am," the deputy said as he handed me the final papers. "We are here to serve the eviction notice. Your father and his son are required to vacate the premises immediately." I took the papers with a steady hand, but inside, my heart pounded louder than ever. Dad had been so certain that this day would never come, so sure that I would fold under pressure. But now, standing on the porch, it felt surreal. I was doing it. I was taking back control. The deputy turned and gave Dad a stern look, his expression professional but unwavering. Dad's face turned crimson as he stepped forward, shaking with fury. "You think you can do this to us?" he bellowed, the words echoing through the neighborhood. "After everything we've done for you?" I stood tall, unmoved. "After you slapped me in a hospital bed?" I said flatly, the words coming out colder than I had meant, but they were true. Dad's jaw clenched, and the vein in his neck pulsed, but no words came out. He threw the eviction notice across the table, and I heard the loud slap of paper hitting the surface, a sound that seemed to reverberate in my chest. "This is war," Eric muttered from the doorway, his arms crossed in defiance. "Fine," I said. "Let it be war, but it's not mine to fight anymore." They both stood there, seething, as I watched the scene unfold before me like something out of a bad dream. This was the final battle, but I wasn't fighting to prove anything to them. I was fighting to prove to myself that I could stand up to them. The moment passed in silence before Eric muttered under his breath, "You're making a mistake. You're going to regret this." But I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't the scared little girl who had let them walk all over me. And that was when I heard the voice of my daughter. "Mom?" Dani's small voice broke the tension, and I turned to see her standing at the doorway, rubbing her eyes and clutching Bunny tightly. "Are we leaving?" she asked quietly, her innocent eyes searching mine. I crouched down to her level, brushing a stray hair from her face. My heart broke at the vulnerability in her gaze. But I knew what I had to do. "No, baby," I said softly, my voice steady. "They are." I could see the relief flood her face, her shoulders dropping as she finally understood. "We weren't leaving. We were staying, and they were going. The deputy turned back to Dad, who was still standing there, staring at me in disbelief. You have 30 days, the deputy said calmly, and you know it. This is a lawful eviction. Eric stepped forward, his expression hardening. You think this is justice? You're evicting your own family, Jessa. No, I said, my voice low and final. I'm evicting abuse. But it wasn't over yet. The next day, things took a turn I didn't expect. I had just come home from work when I saw Valor standing by my mailbox, her usual bright smile replaced with a look of cold seriousness. Hey, she said sharply, crossing her arms. I just wanted to show you something. She held up her phone, and I saw it immediately, shaky footage of the hospital incident. My father's voice, loud and angry, the slap, my body hitting the floor, and Danny, crying in the background. Leah had been there. I hadn't known. I hadn't realized she worked part-time as a tech in the same wing of the hospital. I sent this to myself before it got wiped from the hospital system, Leah explained quietly. I didn't know when or how to give it to you, but I thought you might need it. I took the phone, my hands trembling as I watched the video, unfiltered and raw. The proof I needed. Thank you, I whispered, barely able to get the words out. Leah nodded, her expression serious. If he tries any more stunts, you won't be alone. And for the first time, I felt like I had the support I needed. I wasn't alone anymore.